Whether you're ordering wings for the game, whipping up a 7-layer dip, or ordering pizza, there's something about football that makes you want to eat. And this football season, Uber Eats has the best deals on game day food. No matter what you're craving, from 2-for-1 pizza to buy one, get one wings, Uber Eats will be dropping new deals each week, all season long. Uber Eats, official on-demand delivery partner of the NFL. Order now. Terms and conditions apply. See app for details.
Want to shop Walmart Black Friday deals first? Walmart Plus members get early access to our hottest deals. Join now and get 50% off a 1-year annual membership. Shop Black Friday deals first with Walmart Plus. See terms at walmartplus.com.
When you share your food, you share your heart. So what's on your table this holiday season? Save on your festive feast at Kroger with delicious deals on all the holiday classics. Or wow the crowd with something new, like a quinoa stuffed butternut squash. It's sure to add a pop of color to your spread. How about a sweet potato casserole with a crunchy oat streusel topping, made with care for the sweet tooth and the savory tooth? With Kroger, fill your table with love and watch as your guests' hearts get as full as their bellies. Kroger, fresh for everyone.
Hello and welcome to And It's Live, your new retro football network. I am Martin Ramsey, your host. The following show, the main event, A History of the Champions League, was first recorded on the Heart and Hand Patreon network, so some references to other shows on that platform may not be relevant to you. Myself, Adam Thornton and David Edgar are all Rangers fans and often make the point during these shows that the Rangers' experience in the Champions League, often not a happy one, is covered elsewhere on that platform in great detail. Despite our own fan leanings, these shows are a wider view of one of the most transformative innovations in the history of the game. We look back as football fans first, as history geeks second, and with great love and interest in the subject. We hope that comes through the shows and that you in turn share that enthusiasm. There's a recording of Zadok the Priest on YouTube with over 4,000 comments marvelling at the majesty of Handel and debating about where this sits among his best works. One listener, however, rightly pointed out that a whole load of people are going to be confused tomorrow as to why King Charles III is being crowned to the Champions League theme. UEFA weren't just influenced by it, they took it lock, stock and barrel, and deliberately so. Zadok is, of course, a coronation anthem, the music building to signify the installation of a new head of state. And so too in 1992, where UEFA, with the modification of an old tournament, which would soon become the undisputed pinnacle of the sport. As the lyrics of its new anthem in the 3 main European languages make clear, une grande réunion, ein grosse sportliche Veranstaltung, the main event. And here, over the course of the next year, we will recount the story of how it became just so dominant and whether or not football was the winner as a result. The games, the players, the drama, the wider trends and innovations. This is the history of the Champions League. I'm Martin Ramsey. I hope you know, of course, by now. And I'm joined every week by the man who wanted to do this in the first place, Adam Thornton. How are we, Adam? And why did we want to have a look back over 30 years of the pinnacle of football?
Hi, Martin. Yeah, it's something that I think I've been thinking about for a while. It is 30 years, like you said. It's a nice little timestamp. It gives us something to sink our teeth into when Rangers inevitably depress the life out of us at some point in this next year. So it's an interesting one. There's so many stories, so many threads. We hear the highlights. There's themes that everybody knows. Great players in the Champions League, great teams. Real Madrid obviously spring to mind as dominant in the last 10 years. But I think it's interesting to go through it year by year. We're not going to go game by game, or this team won wasn't that great. We're going to try and dig in, I guess, to some of the stories, some of the players. Yes, unfortunately, you can turn off now, but some of the tactics of teams at the time, that's been quite interesting, I think, for me to look back on with a kind of fresher pair of eyes than I did when I was, well, in this case, 5, and very much not watching European Cup football for the year we're going to cover. But as we go through, if things change from what we originally thought, with the benefit of hindsight, there's already a few things which I think we'll come to that were shocking to me in the elite competition of the time. So yeah, it's interesting just to look back on what is a long time. So there's plenty to dig into.
There certainly is. And joining us as well as the boss. He likes new ideas. When he likes them so much, he enjoys being part of them. Hi, David.
Hi, Martin. Yeah, Zadok the priest, actually a loyal supporter of King David, as I'm sure. I'm sure all of us stuck in at Sunday school and were thinking that there. So, no, yeah, it's nice to be here. I'm a lot older than Adam, as it turns out, so I remember this pretty well. In fact, the final of this I actually watched in Paris, where I was on a school trip at the time. This season's competition that we're going to discuss. So, yeah, I was following it and kind of quite intrigued by this year and also what it was going to turn into, because silly old me, I thought it would be something that would be good for Rangers, and
So did Rangers.
maybe was. Yeah, so did Rangers, and it maybe was for a year or two, but equally the other side of that is undeniably now the Champions League is the gold stick, gold star, the measuring stick. You name it. It's the elite competitions, what players want to play in, and it's now increasingly where I think we used to say, "Oh, I need to do it at a World Cup or at a Euros." I don't think that's the case now. I think that increasingly, it's if you see a good player from a big league, it's has he done it in the Champions League? That's what makes you elite, which is probably fairer, because if you take some players, Gareth Bale's a great example. He was never going to win, by an accident of birth. There was just a level you could get to. Ryan Giggs, of course, before that.
George Best,
Yeah.
George Best, George Weah. I mean,
Haaland
now.
Yeah, but if you do it in this and you do it more than once, especially, and you do it regularly, that's why you enter the elite.
Terrestrial telly will tell you that the World Cup's still the pinnacle of sport, but I guess they've got their own vested interest in that. Adam, do you have any recollection at all of the old knockout European Cup, 4 rounds, unseeded? You could play the champions of Dubrovia and end up in the quarterfinals somehow. Any recollection at all of what seems now an ancient world?
No, summer of '92. Sorry, I was 6 years old, so no, very limited. Don't really remember watching any of those games. The one that the first game I remember was the year Ajax won. Watching that, yeah, that's the first one that I remember. World Cup '94, probably outside the Rangers, is my first non-Rangers memory. So yeah, just a couple of years too early.
Davey, there is a lot of fond talk of the European Cup as it was before the Champions League. Is it heavily romanticised? Because the nature of cup football is always romantic. We still talk about it with the FA Cup and the draw being completely unseeded. We'll get to the drivers for the Champions League in a moment. But I guess I would argue the quality has improved immeasurably when you have the best always playing the best, funnily enough. But I can understand the romantic argument about jeopardy and chaos and for those from smaller leagues having, if the draw was kind, a good old fling at it.
Yeah, I think it's that. I think it was that idea that if you built a good team and got a tailwind behind you, you could win your league. And if you could win your league, you could go and have a go at winning the European Cup. And I think Nottingham Forest are probably the best example of that, where a genius manager built a great side, got them promoted. I mean, they were in the second division at the time. Got them promoted, won the title, won 2 European Cups back to back, and then that team broke up. And for Forest, ever since it was they ended up for years in low leagues, because it had been a bit of I wouldn't say a fluke, because clearly you can't win all that at being a fluke, but I mean that it had been an exceptional set of circumstances. But any club could look at that and go, that could be us. We could do that. Because, you didn't need to spend a fortune if it was still easier to get players than it is now. Now it's, you need to be a super club. It's so rare someone bursts through. I think the last one really was Porto, and we're coming up for 20 years on that now.
That's wild.
I know. It feels essentially like, half an hour ago, but it was almost 20 years ago. And even then, though, Martin, that was considered a wow, look at this. So, even pushed that direction. And now we know that there are only certain clubs realistically who can win it. To the point where Inter Milan, this huge and great storied club of world football, getting to the final last year was a bit of an eyebrow raiser.
Romantic.
Because almost. Inter Milan, for goodness sake. So I can understand the attraction to that. And I think as well that there was a mystery to European football, which was to do with politics of the world at the time. I mean, clearly, before we had all the access to things that we have now. If we draw a team from anywhere, Adam can find out about them on his amazing websites in seconds. Literally everything about them, about how they've played. You can watch them, you can watch footage of them, you can do all of that for pretty much any team in the world. When we were growing up, you drew the champions of Kiev, Martin, or of Russia, or Soviet Union as it was at the time, Dynamo Kiev. And it was so mysterious, because we knew some of their players from the World Cup, but that was about as much as we knew, and finding anything out about them was really difficult. But of course, that's not the case anymore. So I think that there's a mystery and a romance about it. But you're absolutely right. In terms of elite competition, you cannot win the Champions League by a fortunate draw. You can't be. It can be aided in maybe certain rounds, but you are going to face elite teams. It's too long. There are too many top sides in it. So to win it, you can justifiably call yourself the best because you've come through this real test and proving ground. Whereas, even this year that we're going to look at, there's a draw right at the start that would be unfathomable in a first round draw of a competition. I mean, it's unfathomable that big teams would come in at a first round of a competition like this now, such is how it's moved on. But every year, you're absolutely right. Some team would draw, Hamrun Spartans from Malta, and then you would see the champions of Italy playing the champions of Spain in round one. Yeah. And it was really that made you, if I go, well, hang on here. We're losing these teams early, which is the nature of knockout competition.
Indeed. So the format of this series will be, and really starting properly next week, 2 episodes per season. The first one in each season will be led by myself on the games from that particular Champions League season, the standout games, any kind of historical impact, and Adam will take the lead on individual players and some tactical innovations or points of interest. So 2 shows per season is the rough kind of outline. This is more of a prologue, looking at why that changed, the Champions League coming in to replace the old European Cup, and a closer look at, I think, one of the most forgotten seasons in the European Cup history, that trial period, the one that wasn't called the Champions League, but it did have a group stage, 91-92, and I had forgotten so many of the stories from that. Before we get on, anyone want to hazard a guess at the football club arguably most responsible for the European Cup being established in 1955? Bearing in mind that silence
the way you ask that indicates that it's got a funny answer. So I'm going to say somebody like Wolves.
Wolverhampton Wanderers, indeed. Reason being, they were, champions of England in 1954, would be a great team in England through the 1950s, of course, written into our folklore by 1960. And what they invested in was floodlights. and shiny strips that looked amazing in those floodlights. And what they needed were midweek games, glamour friendlies, and they got them. The most glamorous of all being against Honvéd, which was basically the Hungarian national team in club form. Hungary at that point, possibly the best football team in the world. Wolves beat them, and Stan Cullis, the chairman, then declared that they were the best team in the world. I mean, playground logic and all that, but it stands to reason. Wales are the champions of the world, and that's all there is to say about that. Now, there had been talks in Europe about the replicating what there was in South America, kind of Champions Cup, but it never really got off the ground. There were other various kind of informal cross country tournaments, but this really pissed off the editor of L'Equipe, Gabriel Anot, who said, no, I don't think you can just say that. Let's get something that will establish who are the real boys in Europe. And UEFA were then pressed to make this tournament a reality. His original idea was a league, because leagues do sort out the boys better than cups. But in 1955, transport communication in Europe, that really wasn't a goer. So a knockout tournament it was. And Davey, for all the romance about it, you get a lot of repetition, a lot of good defences. Real Madrid, of course. Inter defended the tournament in the 60s. Then you've got Ajax and Bayern winning 3 in a row. Liverpool winning, 4 and 8. Forest retaining it. Even Aston Villa getting it. There's a bit of hegemony about the old European Cup for all that romance.
Yeah, I think there were enough random winners or random seeming winners, but they mostly did it by being awful. Remember Stoya in '85?
Yeah, after Heysel, you've got that interregnum of Stoya, Porto, and PSV.
Yeah, you would get these, and that they weren't maybe the most exciting clubs because it's a two-legged. There is a way of doing it, especially with once the away goals rule came in. And you and I have discussed this before, that British clubs seem to think the away goals rule was something kind of sneaky that foreigners used. We never really understood the concept of it, I think, and got knocked out a lot on it because of it. But I think that you're right. The bigger clubs, the historically bigger clubs, have dominated this. The bigger leagues have dominated it because it's not new that there's more money in a bigger league. That isn't, it's skewed now, obviously, because it's England. But when we were growing up, it was just accepted. Italy, wasn't it? That's where players went if they wanted to earn the most money. It was the best league. It's just a different one now but it was for the same reason. Players went to Italy because they could earn more there. So yeah, there's nothing really new about that there. But this is, you would have to say, where these great clubs really established their international reputations as great clubs. Look, Real Madrid, the early domination of the European Cup and became almost, if you like, everyone in Europe's sort of second team. The glamour that was associated with them. Manchester United have, of course, the horrific the Munich air crash, and then the redemption story almost 10 years later, winning the European Cup, and that sort of propelled them as well. That Liverpool machine of the late 70s, early 80s, and then English football had this, as you say, up until Heysel, had this period of real domination, which is one of the reasons why dear old Sir Bert Millichip felt that the other European clubs were quite happy to see the English teams banned, because they were getting a bit sick of losing the European Cup to them. So it was such an exciting thing, though. I think maybe it's kind of hard to explain. You'll recall this. Adam's a bit too young for it, but remember those Wednesday nights, because all the games were the same night, and Rangers would be playing Osasuna, and Aberdeen would be playing Servette, and Celtic would be playing Dynamo Kiev, and St Mirren would be playing Hammarby. And Mechelen, KVV Mechelen, and it was almost impossibly glamorous, and these were hugely things that every sort of football team aspired to and wanted to be in and be involved in, because it was just so different from the norm. But at the end of the day, have a look down at who was winning it, then yeah, there's still quite a few of those names are in and around it now, because big leagues are, countries who have got big audiences will have more money, and generally speaking, if they spend it well, they'll be able to attract better players. But I do think a lot of these reputations were very much forged in that period. One of the reasons that Liverpool are so massive in Europe, they've got huge amounts of support in continental Europe, Liverpool, which almost seems strange after a period of, I know they've been doing well the last 10 years or so, but they 30 years obviously without the title. But it was during this point, because people, when television was beginning to show more sport, Liverpool were the number one team, and they were the number one team because of their constant success in the European Cup.
So, you want to be a marketer. It's easy. You just have to score a ton of leads and figure out a way to turn them all into customers. Plus, manage a dozen channels, write 1 million blogs, and launch 100 campaigns all at once. When that's done, simply make your socials go viral and bring in record profits. No sweat. Okay, fine. It's a lot of sweat. But with HubSpot's AI-powered marketing tools, launching benchmark-breaking campaigns is easier than ever. Get started at HubSpot.com/marketers.
Hey, it's Kaylee Cuoco for Priceline. Ready to go to your happy place for a happy price? Well, why didn't you say so? Just download the Priceline app right now and save up to 60% on hotels. So whether it's Cousin Kevin's Kazoo Concert in Kansas City, go Kevin, or Becky's Bachelorette Bash in Bermuda, you never have to miss a trip ever again. So download the Priceline app today. Your savings are waiting. Go to your happy place for a happy price with Priceline's Black Friday sale. Save now and travel later with our best deals of the year.
Go to your happy price, Priceline.
Give sport with gifts from Nike. From the retro Vomero 5 sneaker designed with Zoom Air cushioning to fleece engineered with lightweight warmth and next-level comfort, we have the perfect gift for any athlete on your list. Shop now at your nearest Nike store.
How was the rebrand received? Was it? I'm guessing it wasn't as much pushback and angst as the Super League, but because this was essentially just a rebrand of the same thing, was it sort of universally met with happiness, or was it a bit of...
Well, I wouldn't say universally met with happiness, but it a different planet from the Super League thing. I think there was an understanding that this was coming. As whistle stop as I can make it. 1987-88 European Cup, first round, Maradona's Napoli, the magic story of that season after the World Cup and everything else, draw Real Madrid in the first round of the European Cup. And it wasn't UEFA sitting going, oh, this really isn't good enough. It's other chairman, one in particular, Silvio Berlusconi, who was building this Milan side at the time, had dreams of winning the European Cup, thought that's not going to do that. That kind of bad luck. We need to do something different. At the time, he went to Saatchi and Saatchi, who had an executive called Alex Finn, who at the time was going round football saying, look, you're not marketing yourself well at all. This is a nonsense that clubs that big can be out by September. You should have a league. There's no logistical barriers to that. But what he was proposing was a Super League. It was what we've been hearing recently. 2 leagues, I think, 2 divisions, and Rangers would be very much part of that. And it was very exciting. And so much so that Murray and everyone else was talking about, well, it's inevitable. UEFA were frightened of that, didn't want anything to do with it, but understood there was pressure for more. At the same time, as anyone's listening to Dominic will know, when Bayern Munich scalped Rangers at home, again, first round tie, battered as at Ibrox, David Murray is a board meeting, one of the few board meetings that maybe existed at the time, saying, does it have to be this way? Is there not a way out of this where you can just guarantee some revenue, guarantee some home games? Campbell Ogilvie went away, looked at the kind of group stage format, went to UEFA, they rejected it. His counterpart at Anderlecht said, translate it into 5-6 languages, which he did. And it started to get a lot more traction, and really understanding the Berlusconis of this world wanting something completely different. this was maybe a trade-off, and it was seen as that, and that's really how it came about. Now, the Champions League, of course, we'll talk about next week, starting in 92, 93, it wasn't just the group stage. All the marketing money went there. All the television money went into a central fund, which all the clubs could then take. And it was just this guaranteed revenue, 3 home games, big games. That's really all they wanted, and they didn't really. I don't think they really thought about marketing and branding and TV, and they certainly didn't think about TV, because TV markets are obviously going to be the main player in this story. But I think, Adam, there was excitement certainly when we were involved in creating it, and we were involved in being in it, and it wasn't taking over. It was just a group stage, and where they were going to trial this group stage, because is it going to work or not? Well, we'll give it a go and see. And it was in 1991-92. I'll be honest, I haven't really thought much about this, other than Rangers' early exit again, first round to Sparta Prague. But this was basically a trial. It wasn't the Champions League, wasn't called that, but it did have a group stage. And what was interesting for me looking at this, was that the interest, the football and interest, the real kind of stories, other than the final and the 2 teams that made up the final, were all in those knockout rounds. We'll talk about the group stage in a minute, but I want to highlight just a few things, if I may. Marseille, Adam, are beaten finalists the season before on penalties, and possibly the worst European final I'd ever seen. They are 3-0 up on Sparta Prague, who have knocked out Rangers at home. They concede 2 penalties, win 3-2, but lose 2-1 in Prague and go out. Again, where would you get this? That a European finalist in total control, 3-0 up at home, could still contrive to go out. I'd forgotten all about that story. But
PSG could do that, to be fair.
yeah, well, we will come to that by next Christmas or whatever. But that in itself probably tells you that this whole idea of jeopardy really did scare the living daylights out of so many owners.
Definitely, yeah. And I think we see as well a couple of teams we're going to talk about didn't exactly have a easy passage through as well. Barcelona and Sampdoria as well. So it's interesting. Obviously, we're just used to now that, let's be honest, pretty much procession. If there's a big team in the Champions League qualifiers now, until you get to the group stage, so that is interesting. I think obviously we're moving now to more of a league in the Champions League, but that sort of even keeping the group stage, the 1 or 2 rounds. And to be honest, until I look back at this, I hadn't realised there was a group stage there. And one of my questions was going to be, is this a kind of halfway house to getting that in, which you answered. So yeah, I think that jeopardy is interesting. Totally get all the bigger clubs not wanting that jeopardy to be there, because knockout football, especially at that time, as David said, when you don't know huge amounts about teams, particularly probably lots of the teams that we've mentioned, Honved, Sparta Prague, etc. You don't know from year to year how they're going to be, because there's just no information on it. So I completely get that.
You couldn't just jump on EasyJet either. It was, you had to make preparation to get there. One of the things I found really interesting about this was there are 2 German sides in it. And of course, just as a wee reminder of how long ago this was, it's because there were 2 slots allocated to East and West Germany. Now, Germany reunified by the time of this competition. It's the last year, but the 2 slots were still open. So you've got Hansa Rostock, who qualified as the East German champions, and you've got Kaiserslautern, who qualified as the German or the West German champions. And it seems completely from another era. And it is, really. But I found that, because at first, when I was going through some of the matches and I saw Hansa Rostock, and then I was like, hang on a minute. But yeah, even though that to me seems to belong almost to another era, it was a hangover, and it just shows you how recently Germany had been reunited, that this was still a factor.
It probably extends your point. It probably extends your point as well. You literally probably couldn't jump on a plane randomly to go and see Dynamo Kiev without
you could.
lots and lots.
No, you could not. In the 80s, you could not do that. You had to apply to the embassy for permission, and even getting video out of the country was quite difficult. And you would find that it wasn't uncommon at all for teams to not really. Sports writers at the time would say that they would be asked if they could call up did they know a journalist who had worked out there or whatever by football clubs, and they would go into matches, these huge matches, without having ever seen the opposition, which sounds scandalous now, but it was just virtually impossible.
Yeah.
We have this group stage guaranteed revenue, blah, 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 but it's still after these two unseeded rounds, and you've got the champions of France, finalists of the European Cup the season before, out, and we'd have 2 rounds in 92-93. I think we'd only have one maybe 93-94, and eventually you're saying, you know what, let's just get seeded teams in the bloody thing, and the rest can fight it out for these kind of qualifying rounds, and just that evolution of guaranteeing those big names, big countries, because it's fraught with difficulty. But there you are, Davey. An hour gone, and the Stade Velodrome, Chris Waddle with 1, Jean-Pierre Papin with 2, and Rangers fans probably doing that thing that we shouldn't have gone out to that lot, and we shouldn't have. I mean, again,
we shouldn't have.
Dominant, or read books about just how disastrous that night was at Ibrox. But they weren't a bunch of diddies. Look what they've done.
No, they were not.
That.
No, they certainly were not. And this is just really the start of players from behind the Iron Curtain countries. They're just starting to move abroad. So these teams still have, you remember the Czech side at the 1990 World Cup?
Yeah.
Which was a very, very decent side. But I think of their side, only really Thomas Scuravi at the time played went to Genoa, that's right, and Serie A. So, there was still, with these clubs, that sort of, I wouldn't say hangover, but, soon these clubs would be absolutely annihilated by scouts and for transfers, because there was such quality available within them. But yeah, we were gutted because, as you say, that night at Ibrox, we should not have gone out to Sparta Prague, and it was disappointing that we did. But then they go and they knock out this excellent side with household names, wonderful world-class players in them, and somehow get through. And again, I like the way you use the word evolution, and it was things like this where they say, well, the whole point of this is to provide an amphitheatre for the biggest clubs to play each other, and yet we're still putting them in jeopardy. We're still putting them in situations where they can't get through. And your opinion on whether or not that's a good or a bad thing is probably based on which league the club you play, the club you follow in. But what it did, of course, ensure when they moved to that was that sort of area of of random chance in the draw was taken out, and then of course it means that the money stays within those leagues. So the rich get richer kind of thing, which reduces the level of competition. The counter to that is if you're a neutral, and I know that not many people who follow football are, but bear with me, they are the best teams who are in that competition. You cannot deny that. The teams that get through. Remember, Martin, the argument that used to be around about this time that the UEFA Cup was actually a better tournament because you had
more Italian teams, more Spanish.
Team 2 to 4, you had team 2 to 4 from every country in there. So there was already the seeds being planted that, people did say, and that not just fans, coaches would say the UEFA Cup's actually harder to win because you've got a far greater chance of running into a really quality side. So it's all trial and error, this, isn't it? It's all, we'll try that, we'll put a group stage in, but right, you need to play to get into it. And then it was, we don't like that, so we'll one round and we'll half the jeopardy. And then it was actually, we'll just do without that entirely. So I think that maybe is illustrative of the fact that nobody had this plan. Nobody had a vision. And people will always like to tell you, I had the vision for that. They had a vague idea of what they wanted, which was the big boys playing each other regularly. But how to achieve it, they weren't quite sure. And there is a lot of tape. And then I'm sure you'll do seasons where they had that 2-group stage thing for a while as well. Yeah, 2 phases. So it was always very elastic. They had a place they wanted to get to, but I don't think they had a roadmap on entirely how they were going to do it.
Yeah. The final this year is at Wembley, and it's at Wembley for a reason. It's because for the first time since 1984-85, there is an English club in the European Cup. English clubs were allowed back into European football the season before, but Liverpool were champions. They had an extra year's ban. So it'll be Arsenal who were taking their position in 91-92 after being champions of England in 1991. And they're drawn in the second round, Davy against Benfica. 2 1-1 draws. The game at Highbury, the second leg, is brilliant. Arsenal go ahead on the night, ahead in the tie. Benfica pull them back. From the highlights, it really is a lot of fun. Goes to extra time. Alan Smith missed an absolute sitter, but Arsenal are so open, and Benfica just pick them off a couple of times and win on aggregate. 4-2, whatever it is. And speaking to Rob Smythe in preparation for this, he says that this changed George Graham. That it absolutely cut him to the bone. That they were so open and adventurous at home with this away goal thing hanging over them, and it completely changed them as a manager. And after this is actually when you get the 1-0 to the Arsenal, and they become an incredibly good cup team, both at home and
That's right, yeah,
in Europe, because they shut up. And they probably, and we'll maybe touch on it now and again, especially when we look at Manchester United's early failings, and certainly Rangers' early failings, that Arsenal through the 90s are probably the only British club that kind of get this dynamic, get this situation, get a part of, Manchester United, of course, winning that Commonwealth Cup in 91. That quickly seems like a bit of a...
an aberration.
Past, really. Just a faded time where they could just go for glory all the time. That will not work in the Champions League. And very telling, very pivotal that night at Highbury.
The model for British clubs was go away from home and try and get a draw. If it's a good side, go 0-0. And I've spoken to you before about this. I never understood that even as a kid, when you would hear the manager of a British side say, "No, we take them back. Now it's a one-off cup tie. We've got them back at our place." And then that's how they would play it. They would go, "Right, this is a one-off cup tie, lads." Just as Arsenal doing this. I remember this game. It was on ITV, terrestrial telly, which really unusual at the time. This is when ITV drove a coaching horses through the Scottish FA's rules about not showing games. The SFA had this rule. This is going to sound so bizarre to Adam, but the SFA had this rule that if there was any game in Scotland, and I do mean any, like East Stirling versus East Fife, then you couldn't show football. And eventually someone at STV went, "Hang on a minute here. Why the fuck are we listening to them? They're nothing to do with us. We're a TV company. We can do whatever the hell we like." And they did it. And of course, the SFA had no power whatsoever. So I've never understood how it lasted as long, but it did. But to get a game was rare. But yeah, we had that. What had worked for British teams in the 70s and 80s was the physicality. If you've ever seen any of Everton's Cup Winners' Cup, the famous match against Bayern Munich, when Everton batter them, and I mean that in the physical description of that word. Famously, the German coach turns around to Howard Kendall and says, "Mr. Kendall, this is not football," and he gets told to fuck off. And there's Germans lying with broken noses and stuff. And it was whip up passion, run over the top of them, kick them, punch them, do whatever you need to do. By the 90s, these teams can outrun you. They're okay. They maybe don't play as physical a way as we do in Britain now, but referees punish you for that. You've been away for years, and referees are used to referee in a certain way. So British teams would get pulled up for fouls that they'd never get pulled up for at home. So they did, and they couldn't run over the top of these sides anymore, and they hadn't figured that out yet. And the idea of tactically playing it as a two-legged affair, that this is a 3-hour game of football, this is not a 90 minutes and that's it, and there's a distinct half, two distinct halves, one away, one at home. George Graham figured it out first. Ferguson's a great example when you'll talk about it. That madcap game with Galatasaray, absolutely wonderful. And then a couple of years later, though, they go out and I think it was in the UEFA Cup right enough, but they went out to Rotor Volgograd.
Yeah.
Much the same way of just go to their place, keep it tight, and then get them back home. And then our stadium with sheer British chutzpah will get stuck into them. And then the arrival of more cultured players in Britain begins to change that, and the mentality, and Arsene Wenger invents pasta and things like that, and everything becomes a wee bit, more. And then there is an increased physicality in the EPL over the years, and it becomes a thing again. But technique at this point, and these teams, though, they realise pretty soon with the British clubs, we can match them physically in terms of fitness and whatnot, and we have much better technique in them. And they didn't panic. That was another thing that maybe used to happen, when you whipped up the mad British crowd, because it was really violent in British stadiums in the 70s and 80s. It sounds bizarre to say now, but the home fans would be running at the away fans and throwing things at them and be fighting in the terrace. And it just was a sense of chaos. Whereas now these teams are just, right, okay, it's, we're moving to all-seated stadiums in the UK. Let's just pass the ball and tire them out. And the amount of British teams that fell for it constantly. And God, how many times did Rangers fall victim to coming up against a team that we thought were nothing special? And you realise pretty soon into the match, their players are better on the ball than us are. But British teams were so slow to learn this lesson.
Yeah, the away goals thing's incredible, and it's one of the things that people did say about the Champions League, Adam, when it was introduced to the group stage. Don't have to worry about that. No away goals. It's just a free for all, and therefore, again, best of British pluck. That'll be fine. But you're right, David. We British teams didn't quite get it. Fast forward 10 years, and you get Jose Mourinho. If he's at home in the second leg, a score draw is perfect because I just need to draw 0-0, and well, that's absolutely fine. Just to lose will be grand.
This episode is brought to you by NFL Sunday Ticket on YouTube TV. There's plenty to be thankful for. Your friends, family, and the fact that you can now get NFL Sunday Ticket for only $89. So thank yourself this holiday season and watch every game every Sunday when you bundle NFL Sunday Ticket and YouTube TV. Sign up now at youtube.com/Sunday Ticket. Offer ends December 2nd. Local and national games on YouTube TV. NFL Sunday Ticket for out-of-market games. Excludes digital-only games. Terms and embargoes apply.
Looking for a pickup truck to get just about anything done? Look no further. The Chevy Silverado EV isn't just the most powerful Silverado ever, with next-level towing capability and technology. It also offers game-changing versatility with the available multi-flex midgate and tailgate, which means Silverado EV helps you carry large, bulky, and oddly shaped items up to nearly 11 feet in length. Chevrolet. Together, let's drive. Visit Chevrolet.com to learn more.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes per detail.
Another couple of things then before we get into this group, and we'll look at the two finalists then. Adam, Barcelona are drawing against the West German champions Kaiserslautern again. This on paper mammoth clash. Barca win 2-0 at home. Your man at City, Chigi Begiristain, with both goals, and then just this onslaught in Germany. Kaiserslautern go 3-0 up. They're in control of the tie, 3-2 in aggregate, and a 90th minute Baquero goal gets Barcelona through on away goals. They're obviously going to go and win this trophy, but again, the fine margins involved.
Absolutely, yeah. Like we said, the same with Sampdoria, and then Marseille, as you mentioned. Interesting that Barca had Hansa Rostock in the first leg. I assume there was no seeding or teams being kept apart Obviously, it's
Nope.
East Germany and West Germany, but there wouldn't have been any of that. It would just have been a straight. That would have been interesting. But yeah, I think you're right. It was one of those things. They took a little while to get going. These type of teams, as I'll come on to, I guess, but a type of team as Cruyff's Barcelona was at that time. As much as it's we're going to dominate the ball, and if we have the ball, it means you can't have the ball. In cup football, you're going to get the ball, and there's going to be trouble. So, yeah, I can see why teams like Barcelona that want to play in that way and maybe don't relish that physicality that you've been talking about. I can see why they would certainly struggle in knockouts around about this time, 100%. But yeah, it could have been so different in this, and I'm sure it was so different in the years before that with big clubs getting knocked out left, right, and centre.
Yeah. Sampdoria, the other team of note, of course, they were against Honved. They were behind 2-1 in that first leg away. They were relatively comfortable, actually, in Genoa. They were 3 up pretty quickly, and they ended up winning that second leg 3-1. But again, not super easy. I'll bring both of you in on Sampdoria, because this is just what's nascent Italian football coverage on BSB as it was then, before Channel 4 would take it over next season when football changed in 1992. They had a brilliant strip, Adam. They played in this fantastic ground. Again, Italian 90 viewers, especially Scottish Italian 90 viewers, because Scotland played 2 games in Genoa. They had this baldy guy that was like 24 or 5 or whatever, racing up and down that right-hand side, a brilliant goalkeeper. But this partnership up front between Roberto Mancini and Gianluca Vialli, the amount of times that one of them, usually Mancini, just drops that bit deeper. Vialli's runs are clever and Mancini finds them. The two of them are sensational for Sampdoria. Didn't quite click for Italy in the big event 2 years before. Italy don't qualify for Euro 92. It was such an odd thing, because as an international football manager, I guess, you have in front of you what is gold dust. It's chemistry. It's club chemistry. These guys know each other so well. They couldn't quite replicate that, but my word, they did for Sampdoria. That 90-91 Sampdoria season, by the way, is one to go and watch and absorb what you can, because a fantastic league winning campaign. They were in a group with Anderlecht, Panathinaikos, and the reigning European Cup holders, Red Star Belgrade. So 2 not quite gimmies, but 1 very tricky opponent, I suppose. But there's a lot of fun in this group whenever I see any of the Sampdoria action, and it's mainly maybe those 2 plus my brethren Attilo Lombardo.
100%. They were so reliant on them, but if you're going to be reliant on 2 players, let's make them those 2. They were fantastic. They worked so well together. Vialli up top, Mancini in behind, but they would swap all the way through. They scored most of the goals. When they won the league that year before, like you mentioned, I think only Vialli and Mancini got more than 5 goals in the league for them, but didn't need much more. Even in this year, as we mentioned, it was Vialli, Mancini, and Lombardo were the only ones that really chipped in with 3-4 goals and up. I think Vialli finished with 6, just second or third in the top scorers. And yeah, this was their high point, wasn't it? They won the Cup Winners' Cup 2 years before that, was it? 1990.
1890, I think, when Italian clubs won everything. They won all 3 trophies.
And they had the season before that, they were in the final where again they played Barcelona in that. So given they won Serie A then, given that was their only Scudetto, I don't think they'd finished above 4th then, and they probably haven't finished above 4th since, to be honest. It wasn't Catenaccio. I think that would be very unkind because of the flair that you mentioned. You had Lombardo on one side, Ivano Bonetti, obviously, who we know from Dundee on the other flank, and then this front 2, Virtuwood, who was ridiculously fast. I remember even when I started watching, and he must have been, I don't know, by that point certainly mid-30s. I know he played.
Yeah, he played. He was in his 40s, I think.
He played past 40, but still so quick at this time. When you think he's late 20s. 30s, he was fantastic, pinging the balls up, and they were quite direct. You watch these goals, and there's a lot of long balls up to Vialli, and he holds it up and either finishes it himself or he lays it off for Mancini. The game we mentioned against
Vialli was as close to a kind of traditional British number 9 as Italy produced back then. I would say his strengths were he would run the channels, he would hold the ball up, he could finish, obviously. But you're right, Adam. He played as a this is my dream. I love this. This is the glamour. This is like the Michelin starred version of David football. You've got the big guy up front and the wee skillful guy in behind him, and they had just taken it. Yeah, but they done it in an elegant way. We done it at Rangers in a more violent way, but they did it in such an elegant way. But Vialli was, he did not mind getting his hands dirty. He did not mind going up against a big centre back and a real physical battle. And Mancini behind him just had. One time I saw a report by Martin, you remember his name, Brian Glanville. The old English football. Yeah, the doyen, who described him as having magical musical feet. And I like that.
He definitely did. He scored 2 goals in the second leg of the second round against Honved that I loved. There was one, I think it's his first goal, where he, again, a high ball in, he takes it down literally in the 6-yard box facing away for goal, flicks it over the defender's head, and then it's basically a toe poke into the net because the keeper's coming out. And then his second was a bit more to continue the example, maybe a bit more Mark Hateley gets the ball, gets it out his feet, and it's a left footer into the corner. He had everything. It was fantastic watching these back, because I remember Vialli at Juventus, absolutely, and I remember him at much more at Chelsea in that sort of mid to late 90s. But going back and seeing him when he didn't, when he hadn't lost that yard of pace and he hadn't lost all that hair, was really interesting to watch back. So yeah, I think this was undoubtedly their high point. They had, what was that, 3 or 4 years there where, again, we talk about the strength of Italian football at that time, and it was huge. You had Inter with their Germans, AC Milan with their Dutch players, Barcelona with Napoli. For them to win that league was fantastic, and it was well deserved. But they did it with, I guess, that maybe one of the few at that time, really, that weren't relying on the 3 foreigners in Italy. It was their 3 foreigners. I couldn't even tell you who they were. I don't think they played huge amounts. Certainly in this season, it was, as we've mentioned, Virtuoso, Lombardo, Mancini, Vialli. So it was certainly interesting. They were certainly no mugs. They were exciting, and they scored a lot of goals. I think they got, was it over 2 goals a game, I think, in this. When you think about the competition, there you think about their first year in it, only year for a long time. They were fantastic, and they were well worth their place in the final for sure.
Boskov, the manager, a wee bit unknown. Adam, that could quite get the I don't know, the kind of reputation and plaudits that
he's big in Italy. He does in Italy.
I mean, recycle Tommy Docherty's jokes, but more clubs than Tiger Woods. But he really did.
But
they
do that.
Absolutely.
The thing in Italy back then is they were just ahead of the game that we are now. That everybody gets about 2 years, and then you should have thought. But the thing in Italy is that we've got this thing in Britain about we judge people by their spell at a club rather than their talent. And that's why over here, if somebody has a bad managerial, we go, he's a diddy. Why are they appointing him? He was at Club X and it was rotten. In Italy, they'll go, do you remember even recently, Adam, when Juventus brought back, or when Juventus first hired, actually, Allegri, who'd been sacked by Milan?
Yep.
And people in the UK were saying, Adam and I had the Italian football show in here at the time, and they were saying, why are they doing that? That's nuts. Well, it's not. He's a very good manager. It's just it went a bit sour for him at the end there. But culturally in football, they were miles ahead. Things that are now happening in England and Spain and whatever were happening there.
We had that running joke on No Pirlo where it was what's his name? Ballardini, I think it is. Davide Ballardini.
Yeah.
4 times.
Yeah.
4 times at 4 times at Genoa, sorry. Within 8 years. I'm sure there was actually one of the times he got sacked and then they rehired him right away. So there was no other manager. I assume there was a caretaker of some description, but he got sacked, and then I don't know the ins and outs of it.
He was the returning guy. It's genius, but it's the way that they did it. I think that, interesting thing about this Red Star team, Martin, because were you at the game in 1990? They played us.
Mm-hmm.
They are the best side I've seen in the flesh, slightly ahead of that Valencia side in '99, who were incredible. But that Red Star team were frightening. They were literally good at everything. They had Prozanetsky in the middle of the park who didn't run, didn't need to. He was sort of Kevin De Bruyne-esque in his ability to use a football. It's probably a bit, but they couldn't play at home this year. Couldn't play in Belgrade because of the war. And I was quite interested because the record ended up being 1-3, lost 3, and I wonder how big maybe they would have been.
That and the players had gone by then. Prozanecki, for example, But yeah, absolutely, it was a factor. Funnily, we were talking. I kind of talked earlier about the qualifying rounds providing the jeopardy, right? That was where the kind of excitement was. The only, I guess, big key crunch game maybe in these group stages was Red Star against Sampdoria, because Sampdoria they'd stumbled, they'd drawn in Greece, and they were beaten by Anderlecht. I'll come back to Adam about just how they were beaten in Anderlecht, because there's some incredible goalkeeping involved in that match and just throughout this competition, which I know he's enjoyed quite a lot. But they played, so Red Star are a point ahead in match day 5, and it's played in Sofia in Bulgaria, because of the war and whatever else, they can't do that. But I think there's only 4 players, Davey, in this game that played in the final. Now, 3 decent ones: Darko Panchev, Savicevic, and Sinisa Mihailovic. But just the 4, I think maybe 4 or 5. But Mihailovic pops one in, puts them ahead in about.
Of course he does.
So Red Star are ahead. They're already ahead in the group. This finishes it, but Sampdoria, they don't panic. They do kind of stick in there. They get themselves in front. Bit of a fortunate way to go in front. It's an incredible own goal. But I think it's Mancini, I think, that scores with about 50 minutes to go to settle it. Beautiful goal. But you're right, David. It's a combination of things. But let's just say Yugoslavian football wasn't. It was a bit disturbed at that point.
Yeah.
Only a few weeks later, we know that they wouldn't be able to go to Sweden.
People had coveted that Yugoslavia side from basically youth level, hadn't they? Because they turned up at tournaments, but you just couldn't get them. It was a hassle to get them out of the country, and the second that you could, they all went. And incidentally, the great majority of these super players, this first generation of Eastern European players, particularly Yugoslavs, ended up about 40 stone within about a year of going to the countries, because they were like kids. Oh yeah, I mean, see the amount of. They lived the life, shall we say? They took this sort of George Best route with the ladies and the drink and who can blame them, because they'd gone from this regimen, this discipline at their club sides and in their life in general to having money and freedom and whatnot. But they were such a good team. Those names you just mentioned there, Martin, if you're a football fan who was about in that era and you don't get excited by the names Panchev, Savicevic, Mihailovic, there's something wrong with you, because they were just incredible footballers.
Still scoring goals, man. Still scoring brilliant goals as well. But he's a fine example. Some obviously didn't. I mean, Zvonimir Boban had a lovely old career. And we'll talk about Savicevic soon. Soon enough, don't worry about that. But yeah, Panchev didn't quite happen, did it?
Didn't they hire didn't Inter hire a private investigator to look into the rumours that his brother had a twin brother, and his twin brother had turned up? I'm pretty sure that happened.
Because every football fan has a story about that.
Exactly. If we signed the right one, but he turned up and instantly 80 cigarettes a day, all the Italian cakes you could eat, and there's a lot of beautiful ladies in Milan, and he enjoyed himself. But they were a fine side, and there's something almost, I think, impossibly glamorous about that Red Star Sampdoria match. Or matches, the players on show, the names, the strips, the era that it is, and the knowledge that it's soon going to chase. Sampdoria are currently in Serie B, for example, and Red Star have become recently a kind of respectable. Yeah, they're an EL team, now, but they get into the Champions League and they do okay. But at this point, they could be powerhouses, they could be. And you read the players, you guys have mentioned them, they're legends, absolute legends.
Yeah, and
Neil Lamptey popping up in that. Neil Lamptey popping up in that group as well. Where we goal, I noticed him sneaking in, which is obviously you would never have. I'd never have thought that he was about at that time. I know he was very highly rated, but that was interesting. You mentioned it earlier on, Martin, but we need to talk about the goalkeeping of made it through 55 minutes because I watched every goal in preparation for this, and dearie me, delighted to see so many goalkeepers wearing joggies, as I'm sure you know I'm a massive fan of that. But my goodness, as good as some of the finishes were for Sampdoria, this in particular.
In them days, mate, we very much, the fat kid went in goal rule was still in place, and that meant that by the time the club's got the fat kids who'd played in goals at school, they could make them lose a bit of weight, but they couldn't teach them how to be goalkeepers.
I think of all the trends that we look at over the course of this show, I imagine that's going to be one that is exponentially better. Like, you always get howlers in every single era of football, but you're right. Even I know you love Big Paluka Adamski, but he's got a few in there as well. It's long range shots. It's almost like, not the final. It's superb at Wembley, but have a go, have a dig from range because it'll bounce or bobble or whatever, and maybe it's the Air Force for the joggies that are just kind of dragging them down. I don't know, but it's
obviously a combination of terrible pitches, terrible goalkeepers, etc. But genuinely, I was watching those highlights, and they're about 7 minutes long. And I reckon the first 4 minutes was goalkeeping errors. Fantastic goals in that way, like the Vialli one I mentioned. They do so well. They move the ball so quickly, and then they have their shot, and it's a decent shot. But the goalkeeper is nowhere. I think I said to you last night, it was diving for the camera saves without the actual saves at some points. They're diving up in a half circle almost, and I don't quite know how they got the body in that position. But yeah, I was very surprised at some of them. I guess the thing I know I always go on about it in terms of the back pass rule and how you can't really count anything before that. But given how bad some of this goalkeeping is, I'm quite interested when we come on to the next couple of seasons. Obviously you've got Van der Sar, etc. coming in, who was absolutely fine. But I'm interested to see what we find when they actually have to kick the football. That'll be interesting.
It still wasn't uncommon back here, Adam, to see defenders hitting goal kicks, not because they had a tactical thing to play out from the back that you see now, but to welly it. To welly it because the keeper couldn't get it over the halfway line, basically. So that that was a thing. What I always found quite funny about football in the 90s was the way that the British, Martin, we had some good goalkeepers come through, and obviously the English imported good goalkeepers, and goalkeeping improved in the Premier League and whatnot. But see the speed with which we began to laugh at other countries' goalkeepers. I just remember Ron Atkinson on ITV coverage constantly say, well, he's a bit of a live one, this lad, isn't he? Which was wronglish for the goalkeeper can't deal with a cross. And you still have this. Yeah, go on. But they still have this punching. Like back then, goalkeepers that came and punched the ball. Yeah, what is this sorcery? He's insane. Did you see what he did there? It was wild though how quickly we became snobbish about it in the UK.
Yeah, just a couple of things closer to home. I mean, as a footnote, while we're laughing at goalkeeping through the 1991-92 European Cup campaign, not Andy Goram's finest hour, a very difficult point in his Rangers career, as we went into great depth and dominant. But in the studio for Rangers Marseille, which we might touch on briefly next week. Ray Wilkinson, get the ball on top of that Marseille goalkeeper. I think he flaps a lot. That would be European Cup and World Cup winner Fabien Barthez, of course, a young Fabien Barthez, but yeah, one to keep an eye on.
This year, Santa's bringing the power of Energizer into his workshop.
Whoa, the Energizer Bunny's got so much power.
Wait, he's powered up all the toys. I think that means we're done for the year.
I love this bunny.
He's the hardest working helper the North Pole has ever seen. And he wants all your gifts to have the power of the #1 longest lasting AA battery. So this holiday season, stock up on Santa's and the elves' favorite battery, Energizer Ultimate Lithium.
How do you feel great on vacation? Like really good? Easy. You go to Aruba. You'll spend your time relaxing on cool white sand beaches and floating in healing blue water. You'll immerse yourself in natural wonder and find your center on an island where things move at your speed. You won't just feel great, you'll feel relaxed, renewed, and ready for life. That's the Aruba effect. Plan your trip at aruba.com.
My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/campaign to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be. To be.
Adamski, Barcelona in a group with Dynamo Kiev, Benfica and Sparta Prague. Sparta Prague gave them problems. Barca had to work for the 3-2 win on the opening day in the new camp. Sparta Prague beat them in Prague on match day 5, but Barcelona were pretty comfortable by then. Talk to me about this team. Johan Cruyff, of course, in charge. A 3-4-3. I want your thoughts, especially on three players. Ronald Koeman, Pep Guardiola, of course, and Michael Laudrup, and how they would look now. Because from what I can read, Laudrup is spearheading that attack. You've got Hristo Stoichkov, of course, on one side, but it's kind of a false nine. It looks to me he's not an out-and-out goal scorer. I guess movement is at the heart of everything here.
Here we go. Let me crack my knuckles, and we'll get into the good stuff. Yeah, I think you're right. I think when Laudrup joined them a couple of years before that, when it was 88, 89, it was false nine because he's Michael Laudrup and that's the way that he plays. But he was a sort of focal point, I guess, at that point. Stoichkov comes in, Julio Salinas, who plays most of the games in this and obviously scores in the final, are up there as well with them. They are very, very flexible. Stoichkov normally on the left, Salinas on the right, but they are moving about. Like I said, Laudrup doing the same stuff. I know it's a cliche, but you do forget how good he was, able to take up positions that maybe Kevin De Bruyne does now, where he's playing sort of left side of central midfield, but he's also the focal point, just gliding about in a way that we know that they do. And the three that you pointed out for me are absolutely key. They played every single game, all 11 games on the way to the final, along with Zubizarreta in goals. I actually had to be looking. I think Zubizarreta, Koeman and Laudrup in this season, I think they only missed 3 games combined, like all year. So ridiculous in terms of their availability. Obviously the goals as well. We know Koeman, it's the season he got 15, I think it was 15 or 16 goals. Stoichkov not far off that as well, or maybe ahead of him, I think. And then Laudrup too. So I think those three with Guardiola were certainly the fulcrum of it. And you mentioned it was 3-4-3. I would say for sure. However, there's a lot of movement in there. You've got guys like Albert Ferrer, who would be playing in a back three at points, but then when they don't have the ball, Guardiola's moving from his sort of defensive midfield position back into the four. These are the kind of the things that we talk about now, I guess, and when you're in possession and when you're out of possession, these sort of different things. Be more compact when you don't have the ball. But there's so many players moving position and taking up spaces, and I guess what I call the half spaces now. That it was just so difficult to move, and I think that was a Cruyff thing. As we'll come on to, it probably ends up being his downfall as well. I think that obsession with possession, I guess, that we need to create triangles all over the pitch. Everybody knows where they are. You need to position yourself as if it's a trigonometry class. I think he just thought this was the best thing to do. We have the ball, nobody else can have the ball. As we see a couple of years later, when teams actually start to press them and take the ball off them or try to take the ball off them, their physicality was the one thing that I think was very, very missing. They weren't a high pressing team at all. Teams weren't high pressing at this point. You watch the sort of Sampdoria game and they're sort of sitting back off them, giving them the ball, basically letting them play and trying to be compact. When teams then start to get at them, as we see a couple of years later, to a disastrous effect in another final, they sort of were a little bit lacking. And I think that's the one thing to continue that theme. I'm sure, as we'll come on to 15 years later, that was the one difference with Guardiola's team. All of that in possession stuff was absolutely the same type of ideas. Mascherano moving back into defence, Xavi being Guardiola, if you like. Laudrup could be the Messi in this type of team, but the one thing they did have was out of possession. They were dynamite, pressing everywhere, winning the ball back as quickly as they can towards the later years that he was at Barcelona. So I think that was the difference. Guardiola was about positioning and running, whereas Cruyff was just positioning, same as he played as a player, positioning. I'll stay in this little square, you stay in your square, give me the ball and I'll score the goals. It's that sort of ideologue thing that we talk about all the time, isn't it? And like we said, it was fantastic for however long this period lasted, that 5 or 6 years where he was doing well, winning La Ligas, getting to finals, winning European finals. But it would be something that he maybe wasn't able to, or probably knowing Cruyff didn't want to adapt on.
I wasn't really obsessed with many players outside of Rangers at this age. I loved Ronald Koeman. He just Euro 88 was a tournament, probably the first tournament I was able to watch because of time zones. I remember Mexico 86, but there weren't many live games I was allowed to stay up to watch because of that. And that Dutch team in the strip and all that. And now this night further kind of endeared him to me. Is there a player like that now? Is there a need for a player like that now? I guess would be maybe a more relevant question, because he just seemed to be everywhere. His goals from the position, I know he took a lot of penalties, of course, but his goals from the position in the field that he inhabited, although that position's pretty stretched because he just seemed to stroll about wherever he cared. Is that libero gone now because it's so systematic now?
I think it is, and I think the sort of rise of the Makalelis and the Xavis have probably negated that. However, I think it is something. Things go full circle, as we know. We're now back with centre halves playing at fullback at the top levels.
See, on that, Adam. On that, I would like to ask about a player like Koeman, a player like Matthias Sammer, the German, who was another great example of this. But teams, he was brilliant. Teams, though, quite often now can have almost a right back or a left back who's a playmaker.
Yeah.
Is that maybe where these guys are going now, as you say, either if the defensive part of their game maybe puts them in, we're seeing this evolution with John Stones, the hybrid position, and teams are looking to do that. But I'm thinking about players like Tav, obviously, but Trent and guys like that, where the creative fulcrum of the side quite often can come from a defender.
I think that's the three that certainly spring to mind in terms of modern examples that you could argue are doing what a libero was doing in possession. The thing that they probably missed there is obviously the out of possession piece, because the guys that we're speaking about that were liberos, sweepers 80s and 90s were fantastic defenders first and foremost, but they could absolutely do both. So to me, I think it's obviously a lot more structured now. They need to be a lot better on the ball. They've got less time on the ball, but I think that's the one thing that we might see almost as a kind of I don't know. You always get these positives and negatives, don't you, or reactions to actions with all these changes and with teams going arguably a little bit more defensive, and Man City in particular have moved from maybe 2 or 3 behind the ball to now 4 behind the ball, because they want to control that build up. Brighton are the same. They absolutely need to have that superiority in their final third, draw teams out and pick through. It could be interesting to see some teams playing with a sweeper again, because the rise of the centre forward again is back. Lots of teams playing 2 up top with 1 in behind. It could be quite interesting to see that as a kind of antidote, I guess, to that. If teams are saying, right, if you're going to sit back there, then I'm going to sit back here as well, but I'm going to have someone that can ping the ball over when you get caught in transition. So that would be one that would be quite interesting. Whether or not those type of players are about anymore, I can't immediately think of lots of centre halves or even defensive midfielders at the top levels that have the sort of long range passing that we've seen in the past. That doesn't really seem to be there anymore, obviously, with this obsession with possession that we've seen. So I definitely think there's room for it, and I wonder if that's something that we could see having a bit of a comeback now that we're probably in a, not necessarily in a post-pressing world, but we're not as obsessed with it as maybe Klopp was 10 years ago. That sort of high octane pressing, it's sort of dialed back a little bit, and teams are maybe not necessarily playing slower, but they're controlling the build up a lot more. So I wonder if we could see that coming back, because like you said, Koeman, I mean, he's the star of this. I think personally, even though you've got Michael Laudrup, even though you've got Stoichkov, Guardiola is there absolutely, and he's clever, 100%. He's great, press resistant, taking the ball back to goal and recycling it. But Koeman's leading it for me at all phases of this team. The final as well. He's the driving force. He is the creative impact from deep. So yeah, it's really interesting to think about it and see how it could be adapted, I think, to modern game.
Yeah, it was the same with Germany with Sammer in '96.
Yeah,
that even though he was playing in what back then would have been called a sweeper, but he was the creative fulcrum. He was the guy who drove the side on and who everything started with. And it's interesting to think where those guys would play now. Would they be in the at the base of the midfield? Well,
yeah.
Does that inhibit the passing? Because as you say, they could knock 60-yard balls, straight to a forward's foot. So having them that bit deeper, but I would totally agree with your assertion on Koeman. He was the star of this side. Great, and I loved Stoichkov. I just thought he was cool because he was clearly a nutter, right? But he was an extraordinary footballer. Laudrup, there's fantastic footballers in here, but yeah, there was a presence about Koeman and almost a deference within the side, I think, to him as well. That it was almost seen as he was the
even the great systems still need that vital cog, don't they? And Graham Taylor might not have loved him, but I did. The final, very quickly, 0-0 after 90 minutes. Now, I didn't watch this for 2 reasons. One, it was a beautiful night, and I wanted to play in the garden with my pals, which I did. Secondly, I was so scarred by the absolute aberration that was the 1991 European Cup final with Red Star and Marseille, 2 teams full of these talented players, and they just didn't want to cross the halfway line out of utter fear. But this was not a dull 0-0. This was a really, really enjoyable game. Chances everywhere, especially in the second half. Vialli has 2. The first one he needs to score. The second one he's slightly unlucky. Almost like Kenny Dalglish in the same competition, the same final at Wembley in 1978 for Liverpool. It just goes past the post instead of in. Stoichkov, I think, hits the post, but it's genuinely entertaining. And Adam, this night, look, Sampdoria, they are riding their way. This is the crest of the wave. They must know given the strength around them. They're not one of the mega clubs in Italy. This is probably their moment. This is probably their chance, their big night. Barcelona have not won the European Cup.
No.
After nearly 40 years of this competition being in existence, they have to win this thing.
Yeah, lots
Real
of
Madrid
pressure.
own it. They practically got a mortgage out in the thing. So for different reasons, there's a lot riding on this. This could have been like 91. This could have been we'll try penalty kicks, but it's not. It's a really, really enjoyable game.
It is. They mentioned that in this, I don't know if you've read the Simon Cooper book about Barcelona that came out a couple of years ago, but the suffocating pressure to get even just one European Cup, given where Madrid were at that time and as good as Barcelona were. I mean, they were absolutely dominant in La Liga for this period, so it was huge pressure. I watched this full game last night, and it was a brilliant game of football, like you said. Again, I've slagged the goalkeepers, so got to give respect to Pagliuca. I thought he was fantastic in this game. Lots of really, really good saves. For me, Sampdoria probably should have won it in the 90 minutes. I think. And when you think about it, what we mentioned there in terms of Cruyff's philosophy versus this sort of philosophy, 4-4-2, pacey wingers, two men up front to sort of deal with Barcelona's front three. I think we've seen all of those things there, and had it not been for, like we said, I think for me, Vialli certainly missed 2 or 3 chances that he probably should have done a little bit better with. I really enjoyed it. Pagliuca obviously was, when I started watching Serie A, would have been 94, 95, so he just left at that point to go to Inter. I think it was a world record, wasn't it, for a goalkeeper at the point he left? So I hadn't really seen much of him at Sampdoria, to be honest, until I watched that game last night. But yeah, maybe it was just because of some of the other goalkeeping that was so bad. But I thought he had a really good game. And like you said, it gets into the sort of extra time stage. Koeman with that free kick, I think. Watching it, I knew obviously it was going to happen, but you think it's just written in the stars when it was, what was it, 2 minutes to go or something like that?
180 minutes, yeah. But unlucky, Davey, that was a free kick. I'm not sure that would have been given.
Yeah, especially given who's about to come up and hit the free kick.
Exactly.
There isn't a guy watching, there isn't a guy or a girl watching that doesn't think he's going to go up and put that one away, because he did it so often. He was remarkable.
This is not my projection, by the way. I did come in, because it was getting
dark.
I came in for extra time, and my dad said he'll score. And I'd already said, I love this guy, and even I kind of hoped he would. And Pagliuca, Adam, was brilliant, but you don't think he can touch it.
I wanted Sampdoria to win because as soon as basically, they wore the white and blue, you're that age, you're allowed to have a daft reason to like a sign. I loved Vialli. Just the first I remember seeing him was at the '86 World Cup, and I thought he was great. And but he actually said that he had few regrets about football, but that night that haunted him. The chances, because as Adam said, he should have scored, and he should have. That night he had glorious chances.
You can never really tell. You can never really tell at the time, but given Sampdoria had just won the league and if they're going to win the European Cup, I guess you don't really know how things would go. But they then fell back into it.
Well, would they have had to sell him to Juventus? And
exactly.
Would that have happened? So you're absolutely right. And of course, just on its own, it's the European Cup. It's the zenith. It's everything. And I do think though that you're both right. You see 0-0. The year before the 0-0 was god awful. The last time Barca were in the final against Stoya was awful. This wasn't. This was good.
Possibly,
because Stoya did not come to play, and it was just a fantastic game of football between two good and very glamorous sides. As we've just mentioned, we've talked about the whole show, the strips, the players, and they both came and they both, I think, had enough respect for the opposition, but belief in themselves that they could go and win it, as opposed to prevent the other side from winning it. So that made for a good final. But in a way, I think it was fitting, because I think Koeman had been the best player in Europe that year and throughout this nascent competition that last year of it, I suppose, so you can't really call it nascent, but this nascent structure. And I think that there was something just incredibly fitting. And if you're going to lose, then losing to a genius free kick by a genius player that's not any easier to take, is it? It still hurts like hell. But it was, just a wonderful moment. But yeah, Martin, your dad, I guarantee was not alone. And I bet you if you're a Sampdoria fan, when you saw
wasn't
him,
the Sampdorian wall, I think we're saying pretty much the same thing.
Yeah, we know what he does from here. But that's the thing about these elite players, moments like that. That is when he steps up and he's given the opportunity. But yes, I would have been raging about the award of the free kick if I was a Samp player.
I'm probably going to bore people with these tactical after eventings as well, but obviously it is a fantastic free kick. There's absolutely no doubt about it. But the wall, dearie me, for an Italian team, when you think we don't see many of those two-touch free kicks anymore, and I think that's because when you look at the exact moment that Koeman hits that ball, the wall is an absolute riot. There's a space between, I want to say, Mancini and the wall that's huge. Obviously, the wall comes out to try and defend it, and I think that's something that's gone. Now, remember Chris Boyd scoring in the 2008 Scottish Cup final with just an absolute thunder bastard as well. But you don't see this anymore. We even see teams doing that daft draft excluder thing to stop players going under the wall. When you think, how often is that going to happen? I just wonder if, again, I haven't watched every free kick from the early to the early 90s, but I just wonder how much they maybe panicked at that moment because they seen Koeman coming up and they were like,
because if it goes in, there's no comeback.
Aye.
It's done. So I think you're right.
Like you say, he's just laying up, and you think, "Fucking hell, let's just everybody go for it and try and get him." But yeah, I'm not sure they would be. They certainly wouldn't be delighted about it now. That would be a disaster. That wall would be getting talked about for weeks and months afterwards. But yeah, can't take away for the free kick. It was fantastic.
Only drawback, both teams in their away strips, which was a wee bit disappointing. And then Barcelona hurriedly putting on their home top, clashing with those on shots. And it just, they did not care. I don't imagine cavorting around Wembley. Finally, this thing had been buried. Okay, that is us for a preamble, a prologue. We're ready to start our journey through the Champions League. Thank you, David.
A pleasure. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank you.
So Barcelona, champions of Europe 1992, finally slaying the ghosts of Real Madrid. The Olympics were in Barcelona that summer, of course, and the greatest basketball team to ever exist took part. They were called the Dream Team, and very quickly Cruyff's team were nicknamed the same. All looks set for Barcelona to dominate this new era. Not quite as simple as that. Until next time, bye for now.
That was a Heart and Hand production.
Podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
It is Ryan here, and I have a question for you. What do you do when you win? Like, are you a fist pumper, a woohooer, a hand clapper, a high fiver? If you want to hone in on those winning moves, check out Chumba Casino. Choose from hundreds of social casino style games for your chance to redeem serious cash prizes. There are new game releases weekly, plus free daily bonuses. So don't wait. Start having the most fun ever at ChumbaCasino.com.
Sponsored by Chumba Casino. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply.